Do you lecture, teach, work with or mentor emerging artists who need to improve their money management skills? Then the Finance for Hippies budgeting and funding workshop is exactly what you need for your program. With over 10 years' experience in the fine arts and financial industry, the brainchild of Finance for Hippies hosts Teeth Swag and Ndaki have custom designed a workshop to deliver a bird's eye view on the modern day fine arts industry.
Gentlemen, a masterpiece by Jean-Michel Basquiat, and I'm going to start the bidding here at $57 million. $57 million.
Attendees learn how the industry is set up and how artists and practitioners can align their practice in its monetary value chain. The goal is to leave artists in a better position to maneuver their finances within the industry in order to make better financial decisions within their art career. To book Finance for Hippies to run this workshop at your institution, studio, place of business, or via Zoom, please email financeforhippies@gmail.com.
Finance for Hippies, teach swag and Ndaki. Finance for Hippies, teach swag and Ndaki. Finance for Hippies, teach swag and Ndaki.
Welcome to another episode of Finance for Hippies, brought to you by Teeth Swag, who is usually the assistant, gets me a bit of coffee and water, and I, the main host, Don Salamanca, aka Ndaki. Welcome to another different environment, different everything, economic environment. That everyone has found themselves in, but nonetheless we are evolving, we're changing our vision to be successful in this specific different challenging circumstances. I'll allow my assistant to say something.
Yeah. What's up to everybody who's catching this episode? So this is obviously a very special episode done especially for the R&B Turbine Art Fair, same group. Yeah. All right, cool. Okay. The R&B Turbine Art Fair. So for everybody who's joining us for this special episode, we have a super special guest. So before we introduce our lovely and amazing guest, what we usually do on our show, for those who don't know our show is we have a podcast, Finance for Hippies, and we basically just teach some financial literacy to all our artists and creative friends out there. Before we introduce our guests, Ndaki, what we usually like doing is we like to tell you guys what we're drinking.
So usually what happens on the show is that there's alcohol involved. Usually when you're talking about finances, they'll tell you that it's better to get advice from a person who's sober. Usually here, we don't attempt to really educate per se. We really want to expand the discussions around finances, especially in the art field, which is something that usually takes the back seat quite dramatically. As Teeth Swag once said on his famous track, art over everything, but finances really play a key role on that. So this is what we really try and attempt to do. That's why we started the podcast to begin with, to really try and bring finances in the art field and in different art fields to the fore, investigate with our listeners to see how better can we manage our finances. Yeah, and I'm privileged to be part of the R&B Turbine Art Fair. R&B actually is quite close to my heart. I have a past relationship with them. They actually sponsored my junior undergrad degree in a great program under great guidance from the bank. Had the privilege of doing a little bit of time there back in my day when I was a bit younger. So it's nice to see that they're still supporting other fields such as art. The other events I've also followed was the FNB one that was held in Sandton. So the whole group seems to be very active in this field, which is good to see. And hopefully with the information that you guys have here, we can add it on top and have a broader discussion around finances.
Yeah, boy. So,
if you could introduce our guest, please.
Let me introduce our guest. So, it's an alcohol-free episode. The only alcohol we got today is hand sanitizer. That's it. It's whatever's in our hand sanitizer. But so yeah, let me do what I do as T Swag, introduce you guys to our amazing guests, because we podcast here, but because we want everybody to have the best information out there, we've got an amazing person. So I'm gonna just give you guys some credentials. You know, when I found out about her, actually, I was quite hurt and overwhelmed actually when I found out about like what she does and what they do, because I used to think like we're the hottest at this podcasting thing. I thought like, and then I found,
we ran the finance.
You know what I'm saying? I thought we ran this. So she is the CEO of Just One Lab. A platform that gives free financial education to the masses in a very, very accessible way. She is also the co-host of the award-winning Fat Wallet podcast, which has been around since 2016. She's going to clarify. Over 200 episodes. It's South African. It's such amazing content. I think you guys have also just reached 500,000 downloads. If I'm not sure. Yeah, her name is Kristia van Heerden. Come on. Her name is Kristia van Heerden.
Yay!
And she's here to join us today. She's here to join us today on a very special episode, which is adapting to your financial vision. Kristia, welcome to our show. We would have loved, we had a big, before COVID, we wanted to have you dance. We wanted to do like a dance themed episode. We've heard about you in dancing, right?
Yeah, that's a good bait for me. It's better than the rapping, I would say.
Great names on your podcast, and how did you pick these names? It's a bit more whimsical, playful, they're not too formal in the final. How do you end up with Just One Lap and the Fat Wallet?
Okay, so Just One Lap is the brainchild of my colleague, Simon Brown.
Okay.
And so he had worked in the financial services, much like you, like he worked in the financial services industry for a while. I worked for Standard Bank, and then he decided, you know what, corporate life, no thank you. I want to say it takes a very special kind of person to succeed in a corporate environment, but it actually takes a very special kind of person to step out of a corporate environment. And he was like, you know what, I've got one life. I mean, back in the day when he left, which is about 2007-ish, there was no, like, financial education really wasn't a thing that people did. It was still very much that environment of, we are the experts and we will tell you what to do with your money. And in return for that, you will pay us an enormous amount of money, you know, for the service. And he just decided, you know what, this is simple enough for other people to do. So he started Just One Lap with very much a trading training platform. And then I joined in 2015, and we decided to make things very accessible to everybody. And then the Fat Wallet show, how that started was when I joined, I was a financial journalist. I worked for FinWeek magazine. And then I decided, I got really frustrated because I felt like they weren't communicating properly. Like they weren't explaining basic concepts, especially in personal finance. And then I joined Just One Lap, and oh my goodness, I learned so much. And you know what it's like when you go into the financial services industry or into your own financial life, and you start learning. There's just so much to learn, right? And I was having these conversations with Simon, who had been in the industry at that point for such a long time already. And then I thought, hey, well, let's record these conversations and let's give other people an opportunity to see what it's like for a beginner to learn about money as we go along. And that format was wildly successful. And then I think what really is the success of the show is that it's all community driven. So all of the topics that we discuss are questions submitted by our community. So every episode has basically a bunch of case studies of what real people who listen to the show are doing with their own money. When you start out, you tend to think there's one way, like this is how you manage your money and that's the only way. But then when you start to listen to the show and you hear how different people approach it, you realize actually the more you learn, the more movement there is. And so the name for the Fat Wallet came basically from that. I was like, well, if you figure this out, you have a nice fat wallet. So it's not not deep thought that went into that one, but it seems to work.
No, we had the whole A/B testing with people for our name. Remember, we had a list of different names and titles.
So actually,
but
I just wanted to say my initial plan was to call it the idiot investor, like referring to myself. Nerina Visser, who is a person who's really well known in the ETF industry, was saying, people are going to think that you're calling them idiots, so maybe don't go for idiot investor. So that was the only other name in the running.
Exactly. Yeah. Look, I think you made a very good decision on that. I think you made a good decision on it.
And in terms of the special month that we're on for women, why we bring this up is that because we saw one interview that you mentioned that usually when there's discussions for ladies for finances, it's usually themed in pink and there's shoes associated with it, which is...
Yeah, you lost it when you were talking about
maybe let's give this a bit more attention. Where do you think there might be a bit of lack in finances for literacy for ladies? Where do you think it can be?
I've been thinking about this for a long time. And I got the answer when we did a survey of Fat Wallet listeners. And I'm getting... So the Fat Wallet is a conversation between us and our community. And that conversation happens via email. So people send us emails and then we respond. So it happens in social media and stuff as well. But that's how we kind of get what people are thinking about. And then we ran a survey, and I've been getting a lot of emails from women. And over the years, that's been growing and growing and growing. But then when we did our survey, we got such a weird result because it was all men. And I was like, what is going on here? Because I know that it's not just men who listen to my podcast because I can see the stuff that come in. And I mentioned this on the podcast. And then some women wrote me afterwards and said, look, we are busy. We don't have time to fill out surveys. Like when we come home at night, we cook for our families, we put the children to bed, we've got full-time jobs. We don't have time to interact in this way. So I think a part of the success of the format of the show for women is that you can listen to a podcast while you do your womanly stuff around the house. And I mean womanly stuff in the sense of we still do a lot of that unpaid labor, the cooking, the cleaning, the kids, even though, we're trying to address that, but that definitely is still the reality for most women. And you can do that stuff while you have headphones in your ears, or you can do that stuff while you're listening to a podcast. You can't sit on, whatever the business day website for 4 hours a day. You don't have the time. And so I think that's definitely it's not about the information, because the information that we share on the Fat Wallet show lands equally with men and women. We don't need to tailor the information to women because women don't need tailored information. We are perfectly capable of understanding everything that men can understand. We need to tailor the way that we deliver the information to the lifestyles of women. And I think that this is where the industry really falls short. And maybe that's also something that you guys are seeing with artists. Women's careers take a backseat when they have children. And you can't get around this. And this is equally true for a person in finance as it is for a person who is a visual artist or performer.
Fire. What is fire? Fire is that stuff that comes out of the stove. That stuff I spit when I grab a mic. This can, DJ's boo, more fire.
Why? Naki. What does that have to do with the episode, bro? Where did my money go? We got Jiku Joseph's 22/7 budgeting.
War against broke, we fight, no white flag.
Yeah, there definitely is. There definitely is a lot of that, and it's not even I don't know if the word is weird, but specifically speaking within the visual arts, there's definitely still a challenge in terms of female artists who get the same kind of prominence as you know the male artists in terms of just the prominence in terms of the pricing of their works, and all and all that kind of stuff. And those are definitely politics that I guess platforms like what we are part of now and such things look to investigate and dig deeper.
No, definitely. Back to the current state of affairs. The last couple of months has been turned upside down. To be honest, we all have to adjust, specifically artists and people in the performance arts who generated most of their funds from really going out there, performing, selling their wares, selling their artists and so forth. How have you guys adapted to, maybe how have you felt this change in
we were so lucky because when I started working at Just One Lap, we have always worked remotely. We've never had an office. And let me tell you, in the financial services industry, if you don't have an office, or before this, if you didn't have an office, people thought you were insane. Like, it doesn't happen in the finance business. Artists are used to working from home, are used to being freelancers. And in the financial services industry, that just absolutely is not the case. So when lockdown happened, we already had the technology. I was already working from home for 5 years. We had already been doing webinars. We broadcast all of our live events as webinars anyway, even when we do them live. So we were in such a wonderful position and so incredibly lucky to be able to just continue as normal. So we just moved our podcast recordings from live recordings to Zoom recordings. And we had some gremlins in the process, but nothing too big. And we were able to adjust very quickly. I think for artists, you guys are in such a, the memory, the collective memory that we are going to have of this period in history. That is the responsibility of the artist now. And I think that this is a time.
Bars.
I think that in this process, as much as this has been unbelievably difficult for artists and people in the performing arts and not just, everybody in this country, I think that this is going to be the period where a lot of artists will be able to start a very strong career just because of this moment in history. And maybe you've been struggling to find a voice. And I think for an artist having, 3 months where you are forced to be alone, where you are forced to look inside and to process this through your art, I think this is going to be a really beautiful time as we come out of this for artists in terms of their work. And I think the economy as a whole and the artist economy is going to have to change a lot as well, because there just isn't froth. There's nothing extra for people to throw around. The economy is really taking strain. And, this is always the thing where people, you always cut the things that make your life beautiful are always the things that go first. It's like the things that keep you safe and the things that make your life beautiful. So it's like insurance and art out the window. And I think it's a really important time for artists to start to think about monetization and where money is going to come from. And it's going to have to look a bit different from before. It can't be, I suppose I'm calling for innovation, and I hate saying that because I just detest that word. Oh God,
Steve Jobs.
And I get so sick of it, And when you're when you're a media company like we are, like a tiny media company, what people are constantly saying is, "Oh, you have to innovate," and then they just recommend that you do stuff that's been done and doesn't work. So I don't like, I'm loath
Yeah.
to prescribe anything, but I do think that it's an exciting time because we're starting from such a low base. And I think we are going to see incredible stuff.
People usually have, art, I guess it could have been for investment purposes. I guess it could be seen as an alternative asset class where people who can place the money. As you said, there isn't really much froth going around. How do you see that art, that alternative investment asset class being hit? Do you guys do you think it will be hit a bit harder because usually more disposable income goes in there? How do you guys see the vision for
alternative investments in general? And I don't want to comment specifically on art because I'm not an art investor. I'm an art buyer, but I'm not an art investor. I'm not an alternative investor at all. But what I've noticed is when things are completely insane, people go insaner. And I don't know, like when people should be careful, they just go bananas. Yes. So what we've seen is our friends and clients who work in the trading space, for example, they can't keep up with the amount of people flocking to the market. You know, people are buying Bitcoin, people are buying bees, people are buying cows. I mean, it's just the weirdest time because people are not acting rationally. And so I think there might be, I think at the moment people have to start businesses, but I think there might be an opportunity for artists, and this is what I'm saying, to capitalize on this because people are not behaving rationally at the moment it's just such a weird time. What is rational even? I mean, you can't even make a claim that you're being rational because what is a rational thing to do right now? I do think I would caution artists against going into art as an investment unless you can do it at a really very discounted rate. And that is because not because of art or artists or whatever, but that is because art, even though you are an expert at art, being an artist, art remains an alternative investment. And an alternative investment should always just be about 5% of your overall, of everything you own, only 5%. And there's a very good reason for that. It's because in the art world, who determines the price? It's really difficult. There's not an objective pricing mechanism as there is in the market or as there is in an ETF or whatever, or even with interest rates. You know, there's some sort of mechanism that exists in those fields that determines what is fair in a price or in an asset. And in the art world, that doesn't exist. Secondly, art is very illiquid because there's no market that you can just go to and say, okay, I have this, do you want to buy it? Yes, there are galleries that sell things, but you can't just go in there and take what you have and say, okay, can you sell this for me? So there's a liquidity issue as well. And I had a third point about, I knew you guys were inflation. Like your investments have to beat inflation. Always, and it's really difficult if there's no way for you to determine what the price of something is going to be in the future. How do you know that this investment is going to beat inflation over time? Right. So I think there's opportunities for artists to work together to get to market in a more interesting way, and that's something worth investing in. You know, your business as an artist, that's something worth investing in. And I think if you're going to make an investment in art, make an investment in your own art and turn your own art into a little business that you can then, you know, take into the world.
Definitely. Did you want to say something? Oh, okay. It's funny when you when you acknowledge in terms of how the financial industry works and in terms of how the arts work, because as well, when I look at the position that I was in, I artistically, how I had to learn to find a niche was to work very digitally with things. So when this whole kind of thing happened, there was this kind of weird place where there were platforms that I was already working on a lot, which are to showcase my work, which was not necessarily using something like galleries, right? Although I have had the relationship with galleries, but when I got personally to a point where I had to learn how to actually establish my own career, I chose a very digital way to work about it. So it's been interesting to kind of experience this whole weird, wacky situation that's going on. I feel like it was easier for me to adapt a bit to what is a crisis situation because of that. But I also don't want to be the person who seems like I'm saying, I knew this was going to happen, because those narratives are a bit like off. No one knew this was going to happen.
One thing I think that brings us back to the topic, which is adapting your vision, because we had to adapt. Everyone had to adapt to the vision, and we also asking the questions: what does the artist have to do to really also adapt? What are the challenges they have to making that transition to becoming more digitally, which seems to be the solution? So this is really the main topic to see. How do you adapt in this type of situation? I'm hoping artists out there also are initiating to venture into these digital spaces, which can offer them more opportunities where they really no longer are.
Please make them feel
you know what
well.
for me, okay. And let me not generalize, let me just make it very, very local. Having an opportunity where I had no obligations to other people, which is, it's a wonderful privilege to have a social circle and a family and everything, but it does take a toll emotionally on you. And then this virus happened, and suddenly world governments were saying, hey, you chill, take some time and be at home by yourself. Take a moment to take it all in. And for me, that was an incredibly rich period. And it was also incredibly difficult because it was scary and I was isolated and lonely and whatever, but a lot of amazing stuff came out of this. And it made me just realize how unbelievably adaptable we are as people, not just in our lives. And I if we were having this conversation, if you guys both worked at a small finance business and that was your entire hustle, the conversation we would have about this would be different. But I think for artists, that moment of introspection, that breath in to say, look, let me just take a second here and acknowledge that the wheels are coming the fuck off this thing, right? Like, let me just take a moment to internalize this collective freaking out that we're all going through, and then turn that into something else. I think that was, if you miss that opportunity, that's really sad, especially for an artist, because I think you could hear a lot, you could hear yourself a lot better because there was so little noise. Yeah. And I think that this process, it's over. Well, I mean, it's over-ish, but we've been through it now, and now we're moving back, and life is going to, before we know it, it's just going to be the way that it was. And I think this moment gave a lot of people an opportunity to say, actually, I want stuff to be different. Maybe, I don't want to do something as often, or maybe I want to do it remotely or not remotely. Maybe I want to do it more. I'm sure there are artists who work digitally who started to work with more physical materials in this time because you just had so much time, right?
Yes. And yeah. Sorry, that's again, that's another weird thing where I experience myself. So yeah.
All right. So my mantra for this whole thing was just allow. Like whatever came up, I was just like, all right, cool, let's do this. Now today I'm fucking devastated, I can't get out of bed. Cool, that's fine. Today I feel super creative, I'm going to do that. That's fine. It taught me a lot about being adaptable, and adaptable from moment to moment, which is not something that we get to experience that often. Our routines tend to drive us forward. And in this process, we were like, all right, well, do I want to adapt this way? Do I want to do a digital podcast or not? Should we just leave it for a while? What is it that I want for myself? So I think there's no right answer. I think if you can look back at this period and see what you could take from it to grow from it, I think that then it was worthwhile, whatever you did with your business.
In this environment of effectively everything is reduced. Movement is reduced, interactions are reduced, even income is reduced. You have, in one of your discussions, you had mentioned some models that help you make better decisions, maybe while handling your personal finances or handling your business finances. Maybe can you, I think you had 5, there's 2 that T-Swag really connected with.
One that definitely that spoke to me was the one you called the good decision ratio. It would be nice to touch on that. And then one which I've heard you as well talk on your show as well is the cost per use versus cost per unit. Just to clarify, these are financial models to help you make good decisions at a time like now. So please just elaborate and then, you know.
I love that you chose those 2 because those are my favorites. The good decision ratio, the good decision ratio, you can actually apply to everything. Everything in your life you can use that for. So
even how to pick a girlfriend for T-Swag.
You know what? It actually works. It works super well in dating. Okay, so basically what that comes out, it's basically you're gamifying your decisions. So what you want to say is, I want to make a good decision more often than a bad one, right? And that's really what it comes down to. So let's say you're thinking career, you're thinking diet, you're thinking exercise. You don't want to be perfect all the time because you can't be, especially if you're starting out, right? But you want to see if you can make a decision more often, a good decision more often than a bad one. So in your finances, the way for you to see how that goes, you can just adapt this to whatever you want it to be, but this is how I would do it. You look at your last 10 transactions, whatever they were. So it doesn't matter what format you use. I tend to use 22/7 because I do everything digitally so that I have a record of where everything goes.
Shout out to 22/7.
So I go onto that and then I say, okay, these are the last 10 transactions or the transactions of the last month or the last 100, whatever you choose. Which one was a good choice and which one was iffy? You know, and this can be for like, okay, cool, I paid my levies at my house and I paid electricity and I did this, and then I bought something that I maybe could have gone without. So I got like 9 out of 10 for that. Can my next 10 be a 10 out of 10? And the idea is like, if you look at 10 transactions, if you do 5 good transactions and 5 bad ones, you're basically standing still because it's just opposite forces, right? Working against each other. But if you can do 6 good transactions to 4 bad transactions, then you're winning. And that's all you need to do. You never ever need to do more than that. You can always just do 6 good transactions for 4 bad transactions. But obviously, the higher that ratio becomes, the better outcomes you're going to see and the quicker it's going to go. It's like a really good way for you to just kind of keep track of, are you living the life to the standard that you have set for yourself? And that's why I don't make any prescriptions about what a good decision is. You have to decide if that was a good decision. And if you have peace with that decision, then it's good. Cool, fine. Like nobody is here to tell you how to live your life, right? So I love that one. It's my favorite. And then, no, it's my second favorite.
Just to elaborate on that, in the trading industry, they probably call it the win-lose ratio.
Yes, I got it from trading,
Yeah, so in order to be successful as a trader effectively, the win-lose ratio needs to be in your favor. It's like tossing a coin.
So that allows you to cut off our guests while they talk. That gives you license to cut off our guests while they talk.
That's why digitally is a bit hard.
You would have slid in.
But please,
that's dope.
You see the same concept really applied in different parts of life. But
I love that in trading, especially because what they talk about there is the size of your win and the size of your losses. I just adapted it from trading. I 100% just took it from there. Because what they say is, all right, you go into 10 trades and maybe you lose 5 trades and you win 5 trades, but you lose maybe like 10% on a trade and you win 20% on a trade. Then that skews that ratio a lot, right? Because it's not just how often you win or lose, it's also by how much you win or lose. So you want your winners to be bigger and you want your losers to be smaller. And this is the same. You can apply this principle that just across your whole life. and say, okay, I want my losses to be small and my wins to be big. And then cost per use or cost per unit, that is my absolute favorite thing, because I make every financial decision in that way. Basically, I go, I need to spend money on this item, whatever it is. How many times am I going to use it, or how many units are in the thing that I'm buying? And what does it cost me per every time that I use it, or per every unit that's in there? So I like to use toilet paper as an example, because it's the easiest way to do it. So I don't want to ever pay more than R5 per roll of toilet paper. I feel like that's my limit, right? So what you do is you take the price of the toilet paper, you divide by the number of rolls, and that's your cost per roll of toilet paper. And you can do this with rice. The price of rice divided by the amount of grams. But where it becomes super handy is then for stuff that you're going to buy for your life and for your home. Because what it helps me to do is I look at something and I go, oh, I really, really, really want that. And then I have to say, okay, how often am I going to use that? So my family, at the beginning of this year, went through a very weird waffle phase. So my brother lives in Canada, my parents live in Vienna, and I live by myself. And the two of them, I don't know how that happened, but they had decided that waffles are now all the thing. And so my brother got a waffle maker, and my parents have a waffle maker that I didn't even know that they had, right? Okay. And then I started thinking, but that's such a stupid purchase, because if my brother had eaten a waffle every weekend for the last year, then the waffle maker would make complete sense, because in the next year, he is going to divide.
Just to say I have a waffle maker on Instagram, hard copies. Please, I get you. I really know them.
But yeah, so if he was gonna if he ate waffles every weekend, then he could divide the price of the waffle maker by 52 to get his cost per use in a year. But they don't eat it every weekend. They've had it once since you got the waffle maker. So the cost per use of the waffle maker is the cost of the waffle maker, right? So let's say it was 500 Rand. He basically ate 500 Rand waffles. Now, the reason why that's dumb is because he could have gone out and bought a waffle for 50 Rand, right? So it helps you just to phrase things a bit differently in your head. And I know people think that I'm being pedantic and miserly when I do that, but honestly, it helps me so much when I make, especially when you're like in the store and you're feeling the impulse or you wanting to be impulsive in your purchases.
Yeah.
I think this is very powerful if the artist can see it when they are really working. Oh, that's
what I'm doing. That's dope. We appreciate that. Shout out. Who's that? What's his name?
The co-host.
The co-host. He's writing all the notes. What's up, G?
A king is only a king because of the people. They give you the power. King's disease, Kingsley, Kingsman.
Hey, bro, the king pays his taxes. Financial coaching episode. Manoka Mate. Finance for Hippies, season 2.
War against broke, we fight no white flag.
Can you hear it?
This side.
So artists recently went through with teeth an art process which I was new at, and I got to understand that there's a lot of input costs that come in to produce the beautiful art that you eventually see at the fair. And one thing that's quite important is obviously the final price that you believe will be a fair price to charge. But to charge a fair price, you have to take into account the cost that led you to produce the unit. And I think that concept of yours really could do well in a setting where an artist is looking at input costs and wants to see how much they can get the most out of whatever they're purchasing. For example, Teeth was working and they schooled me on paper. Apparently, there's hot people out there producing the hottest paper. I thought paper was just paper, but now paper is not just paper. And there's people who are producing, moderately priced paper, which it can. If you're new to me, I would ask why you're not using that other paper and this paper. Who are those lovely brands? Let's start.
Fabriani.
Say that again.
Fabriani paper.
Fabriani paper.
Yeah, boy.
And then the German one.
It's a paper that I used for like photo digital printed stuff. It's Hanamule. I could be pronouncing it wrong, but we're gonna Google will sort us out. We'll get an AI thing to give us the right pronunciation. But yeah, Hanamule.
This paper is by Hanamule. They are very experienced when it comes to making fine art paper.
So it's input costs such as this that you really have to apply your mind to see what you're eventually getting out of. How much am I spending on inventory to produce my art? Is it not idle money that's sitting there, and I'm not producing as many art pieces that I should? So I think it's a very good model to really help artists manage their
I think also for artists, which really, when it comes to the sale of your artworks and how to determine that, I always find that creatives tend to undersell themselves a bit. And especially when you're new and you're just starting out and you haven't maybe done quite as much. And I think it's worthwhile to sit down. Worthwhile to sit down and think about the value of your perspective. And I think that's really interesting. That to me, that's something that I could, I've been thinking about risk for probably 2 years, just the concept of risk. And I think that this is something like, what is the value, the monetary value of my perspective? That is something that I can spend 2 years thinking about. I think as an artist, it's worthwhile thinking about that, because there's also an intersection between the materials you use and the value of your perspective. And you need to understand what adds the most value. Yes, your materials matter. Yes. Of course, nobody wants a terrible quality product, but your perspective is what makes you worth buying. It's like, I don't, as a consumer of art, I don't know whether you use the good paper or the bad paper. As a consumer of art, I value your perspective, and that's what I'm paying for.
Exactly. And that, but then we can open up it's almost Pandora's box with art, because cause or who can I don't know, Banksy, or sometimes Banksy will go and he'll take printing paper and he'll do a Banksy, the street artist Banksy. Am I okay? Yeah, he'll take a cheap piece of printing paper and he'll do one of his stencils, and then he'll put them up then, and it will sell for people.
That's interesting, because that's
go all crazy about it. But
that's reputation, right? So there's perspective that got Banksy to be Banksy. And now there's reputation. So he is costing, and the reason why you're paying a premium is because he is costing his reputation on top of his perspective. It's not just his perspective anymore that you're paying for. And that's weird, because that takes a bit.
We need perspective.
So that's the bag. that's it. Okay, that's really cool. Look, I think I've pretty much got like one other question that I'd like to ask you. I'm not sure. And I'm gonna just try simplify this question, but it was in terms of money habits. And so I found myself, even through this phase, right? There was a very direct scenario where, through listening to getting a lot of information just about money after making just beyond ridiculous mistakes throughout my whole life, I got to a point where I kind of started really hacking this saving thing. I was able to kind of, money comes in, some I don't even know what it's got to do, but I don't even want to know that money is there. It's kind of just put it away somewhere. I was starting to get good at that, but now a crisis and a pandemic happens, and there's certain things that I wanted to teach myself to get out of the way. So, and I was kind of reading samples, and there was just bad debt that I wanted to get out of the way. Like bad debt, which is just like bad, which is, we have machonistas, the machonistas, right? There's things like that, just like bad, ridiculous debt that you don't need. So it's like, I wanted to just allocate to just getting rid of bad debt, because I kept finding myself in a scenario where, what's the point of me putting money away if I'm still not getting rid of like stupid debt, So, but then that got me into a habit where I started understanding that where I probably now feel like I relapsed a little, because once I started getting, I got rid of that like really bad stuff, but I was starting to, there's always this debate between like saving and I don't know, there's this debate between like saving is almost like you're doing like something old and it's not going to grow your money, versus trying to just be a bit smarter and actually grow your money. So it's almost like I found myself getting in a situation where I will start doing things which don't necessarily mean I must just like save, but I don't want to stop saving because I know that's important as well. So it's like, so that's my question to you, however it makes sense. So yeah, my question was more, my question is actually, my question is more on habits, because I've heard you speaking about, you said like you had gotten very good with credit card spending and then like you'd cut that off, but then you kind of got that little habit creeped up again, you started doing it again. So I'm trying to understand, is there ways to, maybe how you find yourself working
I think
through
it's really,
those things? So that
it's really important to cut yourself a lot of slack here. It's important to understand why it is that you have three concepts that you just touched on that are all three true, but I think you would be able to make better decisions if you understood why they were true. So you know that you have to get rid of debt. And so there's this podcast that we did yonks ago. It's called The 5 Concepts to Make You Rich. And it basically is just 5 very simple financial principles that you need to understand that allows you to make better decisions in the long run. And you touched on 3 of them now. Actually, you touched on 2 because no, let's say 3. All right. So you want to avoid debt.
Thank you.
You want to avoid debt because of interest. So interest is money that you pay for the privilege of using other people's money, or it's money that you get that other people pay you for the privilege of using your money. So now you've answered 2 questions. Why is debt bad and why is savings good? Because with debt, you pay interest for the privilege of using the bank's money. That's a little fee that you pay for using other people's money. And when you save, the bank takes your money and like uses it to make money of their own. And so they pay you a little fee, much smaller fee than you pay them, of course, because banks. But they pay you a little fee for using your money. So now you are on the good side and the bad side of interest here. And the problem, remember the small losses and the big wins? What you have here is a big loss and a small win, because you are paying on a credit card 17% interest, and in your bank account, you're earning 5% interest. So you're paying more for the privilege of using other people's money. Oh, sorry about that. That's very noisy. Then other people are paying you for the privilege of using your money, right? So those 2 are really important to understand. The thing that you feel like you're missing, so now I think you feel like you're being a little bit old-fashioned by having cash saved instead of doing something more exciting with your money, like investing. And the reason why there is a difference there is, so when we talk about risk, and it's actually, we did a whole podcast about this yesterday. When we talk about risk, we say that the outcome is different than the outcome you were expecting. So in a short-term portfolio, if you put your money in something like shares, the price of shares go up and down a lot in a short period of time. But over time, they go up. And so for you to make money from shares, you need a little bit of time so that you don't have to sell when the market is down and then you can lose money. So that's a risk for shares. What people don't talk about is there's an inverse risk for cash. The longer you keep cash, the more risky it becomes. And that's because of the third concept, which is inflation. So inflation reduces your spending power over time. So the longer you hold on to cash, the more risk inflation introduces to your personal portfolio, which is now just consisting of cash. So what you want to do is you want to have a combination of the 2, right? So you want to have some money that is earning you interest because you need to be able to cover yourself in an emergency to protect. So that becomes almost like insurance for your investments. You want to protect your long-term stuff from short-term movements by not having to sell them when they go up and down, right? So you want in the end to have a little bit of a combination of this. But if you are starting out and your journey is the same as mine, I was in 100K's worth of debt when I was like 23 years old because I was a fool and I didn't know how any of this stuff worked and nobody had explained it to me, you know, and so I also had to kind of forgive myself for that. Going through this process of paying back your debt gives you a wonderful habit of saving. The habit of paying back debt and the habit of saving is the same habit. And when I paid off my debt, I was like, whoa, look at me, I'm a super saver, because I was already used to not having that money that I had to put towards the debt, except now it was working for me instead of working for the bank. And I think that process, give yourself enough time to internalize that feeling. Because I think what happens a lot of times is that people are like, oh, I have to do something. And it's almost like a panic decision. They go out and they go buy something weird, you know, instead of going, all right, well, let me internalize this. Let me understand just interest. Let me just understand how interest works. Let me look at my credit card statement and my bank statement and see where interest plays a role. And then let me try and figure out why they say my interest is 17%, but I only pay 2% now. Like, what's going on here? And the same on the other side. Why do I earn so little interest when I'm paying so much interest? And once you internalize that, then you start to understand, all right, cool, I'm earning a bit of money here, but I'm losing a bit of money there. And then you can move on to inflation. All right, now where does inflation fit into all of this and how can I understand that? And once you have inflation, then you can start thinking, okay, compounding. You know, that's the other one that you need to think about. Like, how does compounding work? And when you are learning about interest, you also almost intuitively learn about compounding because you have that money sitting there and now there's more money than the previous time. Why? You know, that's compounding and you see that happening. So these are very basic things, but I think it's really important not to be hard on yourself about it. There's time, you can figure it out. It's not difficult. You are going to get there. Just don't. Unfortunately, when it comes to personal finances, you can only change or do anything one income at a time, one paycheck at a time. You know, the change is slow. That's why I was saying at the beginning, it takes 3 years for people to be like, oh, I finally did my first investment. You know, the process is slow because you have to implement month by month. Or if you're a freelancer, invoice by invoice. Yeah. Oh, and that's the other thing that I really wanted to say to artists is when we talk about this financial management stuff, we tend to default to salary earners just because it's easier, because that's, you know, it's just easier to explain when we talk about salaries. But a lot of you guys don't have a steady income. You have it's very project-based. So what I want you to think about is not what are you going to do, like what is the goal that you want to get to or whatever. I want you to think about what percentage of all of the money that comes into your life you are going to put towards your future. So you can be like, I'm going to do a fifth or a third or whatever income that it is that is coming towards you. You have to say, that's what I'm going to do for my emergency fund because this needs to cover my expenses for a year. Like, I think if you don't have a steady income, that emergency fund needs to be really thick. So I need to cover my expenses for a year. And to do that, for whatever income I'm earning, I'm going to put 1/5 of that income towards my future and then do with the rest what I need to do with the rest. You do it on an invoice by invoice basis.
And if I were to pose the question to my fellow artists, how many artists have pension funds or pension plan, retirement plans? You know, it's something even much more difficult, I guess, for them to steadily build up to. But it's truly required by whoever you are. Eventually, you have to think about retirement and how you're going to live off retirement. Unfortunately, those erratic paychecks have to cover that too. So it's something.
I think though, I think getting to where we are within this conversation. I think those kind of questions, you know, as you know, to sum it up on, you know, where visionaries meet. I think those are, you know, having you here as well. I think that's the most amazing part, because I think those kind of uncomfortable discussions, which are hard to understand, hard to break down. I think, you know, you've created a platform that allows certain access to those kind of conversations. And if people have those concerns, you know, obviously that's what you're there for. We have our own way of trying to bring it to a creative and artist audience, and artists, a creative centered kind of audience as well. So I think that's the beauty of what we're all collectively trying to do. And yeah, I think that's
I'll
what's
say
up.
that if you're an artist and you have worked a retirement plan some way, then you are truly a visionary.
Yeah.
If you can see 65 and beyond, then you're truly a visionary. That's for me.
But any maybe parting advice outside of the fact that there's two things everyone watching this should do: should listen to our podcast and listen to her podcast. do you have any maybe parting words, how people can keep in contact with you?
This is there's so much that I want to say. I think I'm
don't worry, we can do follow-ups.
I'm excited. I'm excited
we can do follow-ups.
I think I'd like to challenge artists, because I think what happens a lot of times is we get so well, this is not my field, and so I'm just going to avoid it. But I think we are at a moment in our history where you guys can really change the way that the industry works. You can change the way that artists get paid. You can change the way that you think about your own financial situation and your future. You can think about a level, I think what every artist dreams of, and what I dream of, is a level of financial independence where you can just forget about the money and just focus on the art completely. And I think that's something definitely I'd encourage everybody to look into, is how does that, it's called financial independence, retire early, or FIRE. How do they get to those things? Because there's a bunch of people who are in their 30s and 40s who have retired because they managed to accumulate so much wealth. How did they manage to do that? And what were the principles that were underlying those things? And then make sure that I think as an artist, you have such an idea of what it is that your ideal life looks like. And that probably has a lot to do with a lot of time and a lot of freedom for creativity. And you have an advantage because a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't understand what it is that they want money for, or what it is that they want their freedom for. So because you already have that figured out, you actually have a lot already to set yourself up to be in a really stable financial situation, and to free up your mind and your mental energy to be more creative and to do better. But I also think that because creativity is something that you can tap into and encourage, I think that you can creatively deal with the industry as well, and you can creatively find solutions for how artists are paid, how artists work together. I think that this is a beautiful moment in history, because I think we're going to see a lot of cool stuff, and I'm excited to see what you guys do.
No, definitely. I think we think so too, collectively. In terms of sources of advice, I'm sure you have a lot of people hitting you up for advice on specific topics. How do you usually guide people to clear and reliable information?
To go to justonelap.com, which is us. So it's LAP at the end. A lot of people are like just one leap, but it's not a leap. It's a lap, as in a lap that you run. So justonelap.com, you can find the Fact Wallet Show there. And I really encourage you to go through the Fact Wallet Show archive, because we discuss a lot of things. Like it's really deep and broad. There's a lot that we've spoken about. And from there on out, if you have any specific questions, we answer every single question that we get from our community on the show. So you can send those questions to ask@justonelap.com. But I'm also on Twitter at KristiaVH. It's KristiaVH. And you can find Just One Lap on Twitter as well. So we are very reachable. We're very eager to talk to you guys. We do a lot of events and a lot of live events. So we would encourage you. They're always free, which I know is important. So we encourage you to come to these things. And even if you're not really interested in what the topic of the evening is, you come to these events and you get to meet a lot of really cool and interesting people who are all trying to figure out their money from all walks of life. So that's really fun as well.
No, that's fantastic. I think that will bring us to the tail end of our show. Thank you very much for taking time to meet us with our lovely little setup here and taking the time to give us your perspective into how we can all, regardless if you're a male, female artist or not, how we can all try and better our management of our finances, and we can all be better off in the future. I think it's knowledge that we can pass it down to the younger kids coming through. So I'm glad to do shows like this where I learn more and more and more.
Fire
Number
waffle
one, fire. What I got was fire and alternative investments should constitute 5% of your portfolio.
There we go.
Do not spend 50% and say, no, I got savings.
Yeah.
Is it beating inflation?
Yeah. But spend that 5% nonetheless on art.
For sure. Final words?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And just thank you so much for being welcoming to us. Thank you so much for being sharing your information with whoever's watching and whoever's listening. And you've just been very welcome. We had all our technical issues and stuff, and we're open. We'd love to whether follow up on some whichever time, but we're open to just have just keep going with what you're doing, and please keep going with what you're doing. And
guys, this was such an honor for me.
Appreciate it.
Sorry.
We'll send you a link. Lovely.
Nice.
We'll send you a link to our mixtape. The hottest mixtape in the streets right now. I was rhyming circles around this young man here. But it will be lovely if you could give it a hear and see how you find it. Watch out, everyone, for my solo tape where we've had creative differences. So I dropped them from the label. So
can I just say, the next time I would love to do this face to face. I'd like to do a little kizumba with one of you guys, and I want drink, please. No more of this sober business. Thank you.
There we go.
Full format of the show.
There we go. You've got the format.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Kristia.
Thank you, guys.
Over and out from Finance for Hippies.
Swag and Daki.